My name is Maris Caldwell, and I am 69 years old. I've always been a woman of patience, a woman who believed in quiet strength and steady hands, whether in my garden, my kitchen, or raising my children. This morning, the sun spilled through the windows of my Portland home, warming the linoleum where I stood stirring oatmeal on the stove. I hummed a tune I hadn't thought about in years, the kind my mother used to whistle while folding laundry. The calm was shattered by the clatter of keys and the sharp click of the front door. Ethan's voice followed almost immediately, tight with fury. "Don't you dare argue with my wife in her house," I froze. The spatula in my hand hovered over the oatmeal as if it, too, had been shocked. My son, my own son, was yelling at me in the kitchen I had built, in the home I had poured my life into. My mind raced. This is my home. I built it. I raised him. How could he do this? Rebecca stood behind him, arms crossed, a triumphant smirk curling at the corners of her lips. Her eyes scanned the room as if it weren't mine at all, as if everything I had accumulated, cultivated, and cared for over decades belonged to her now. It had started with something small. She had moved my garden plants without asking, placing them in the sunniest corner of the porch that was really mine. When I asked her to please let me care for them the way I always had, she had shot back. "This is my house too now." Ethan didn't hesitate. He didn't even glance at me. He defended her as though I were an intruder, a stubborn old woman clinging to her past. His fists clenched at his sides. His face was unreadable, but the rage in his voice made my chest ache. I realized, in that moment, that the boy I had changed diapers for, spoon-fed when he refused to eat, carried in my arms during fevers, had grown into a man who could turn against me for a woman he had known for only 2 years. I sank against the counter, the spatula clattering to the floor, the oatmeal boiled over, unnoticed. The silence of the house I had raised my family in, felt like a hollow echo, and in that echo, I understood that nothing would be the same. I remember the day Andrew and I arrived in Portland like it was yesterday. I was 22, holding Ethan close against my chest, my arms aching from hours of travel, my heart full of hope. Andrew's eyes sparkled with determination as he carried the 2 old suitcases we owned between us. And I believed, without a shadow of doubt, that together we could build a better life. We had nothing but hope, hard work, and each other. The first lot we bought cost $3,000, a rocky, weed-choked piece of land on the outskirts of town. Andrew said, "Maris, we'll build our home here. You'll see. One day this will be ours." I trusted him completely. For 5 years, we lived in a tiny tin shack while we scraped together enough money for lumber, nails, and concrete. I sold homemade pies in the mornings, cleaned other people's laundry in the afternoons, and sewed dresses for women in the wealthy neighborhoods at night. Every dollar went into a coffee can under our mattress, every penny earmarked for the house or for Ethan's future. When Vincent was born, the challenge doubled. 2 children to feed, 2 mouths to clothe, and a half-built home looming over us. I learned to exist on 4 hours of sleep, waking before dawn to bake, rushing to drop the boys at daycare, then to laundry jobs, then sewing until midnight. My hands cracked, my back ached, but I never stopped. I never gave up. Then Andrew died suddenly in a construction accident. 15-year-old Ethan, 12-year-old Vincent, and I were left alone with debts that seemed like mountains. I could have faltered. I could have given up. But I didn't. I worked harder than ever. Babysitting, washing clothes, selling whatever I could, doing anything to make sure my sons never felt the absence of their father. to give them the education I never had. When Ethan told me he wanted to study engineering, I sold my beloved sewing machine to pay his tuition. It cost me my daily work tool, but it was worth it. I watched him study late into the night, knowing every stitch I had sewn, every pie I had baked, every early morning and late night had brought him here. And Vincent, with his gentle patience, thrived too, learning computers and eventually earning a stable income. Every brick of this house, every corner of this garden, every wooden beam of this roof carries the memory of sacrifice, of long days and longer nights, of a mother's unwavering resolve to give her children what she never had. This was my life's work, my legacy, my sanctuary. Ethan arrived that afternoon holding the door open with a proud smile, and behind him walked Rebecca, his wife of just a few months. I remember the first time I truly noticed her eyes scanning the room, lingering on the worn couch and the mismatched curtains with an expression I couldn't read at first, but soon recognized as thinly veiled disdain. "Nice place," she said casually, her voice polite but sharp, as if testing the boundaries of this home that had been mine for decades. I smiled politely, offering coffee, hoping first impressions would soften whatever unease I felt. Ethan chattered on, oblivious to the tension, while Rebecca wandered slowly through the living room, trailing her fingers along the armrests of my furniture and pausing at the photographs on the walls. The small comments began almost immediately. "Oh, this rug is interesting," she said, wrinkling her nose slightly. "I never realized oatmeal could taste like this," she added, when I served lunch. At first, I laughed nervously, dismissing them as harmless preferences, but the little jabs continued over days, moving a chair here, swapping a pillow there, rearranging small trinkets on my shelves. I watched silently, unsure whether to speak up. Every gesture she made felt like an intrusion, every alteration a tiny claim on what was mine. My home, the house I had built with Andrew's hands beside mine, the space that had sheltered my children through storms and sleepless nights, suddenly seemed fragile under her gaze. I questioned myself. Should I confront her, or let the discomfort pass, hoping it would fade? Every moment she lingered, every subtle rearrangement of furniture, I felt a rising tension in my chest. The sanctuary I had created, brick by brick and stitch by stitch, felt less like home and more like a stage where I was being observed, judged, and quietly displaced. And so I waited, careful to speak only when necessary. While an uneasy awareness settled in my mind, this presence would not remain small for long. The tension in the house grew almost imperceptibly at first, like a slow leak in a familiar pipe. A misplaced potted plant here, a jar moved there. Each small act by Rebecca was accompanied by a casual smile, as if she had every right to rearrange my life. I tried to speak gently. "Rebecca, that plant needs full sunlight. It won't thrive in that corner." Ethan shook his head impatiently. "Mom, she's just making it comfortable for herself. Relax. You don't have to control everything." I blinked, trying to process his words. The son I had nurtured, guided, and protected now, dismissed my years of care as if it meant nothing. I swallowed the ache in my chest, forcing calm. I reminded him that I had tended those plants for 15 years, watched each leaf unfurl, remembered every seed I had planted. Ethan barely listened, his focus entirely on defending her. The battles multiplied. Rebecca reorganized the kitchen, shifting pots and pans into places I could no longer reach, leaving me to adapt or go without. She monopolized the bathroom for hours, leaving me scrambling for warm water. Even small household chores became points of contention, and Ethan's allegiance never wavered. Friends began to appear unannounced, lounging in my living room, sipping coffee from my pantry. I felt invisible, a guest in my own home. I tried once again to reason with Ethan, explaining that respect was mutual, that my comfort mattered as much as hers. But he waved me off, smiling as though my concerns were trivial. I retreated into silence, counting the hours I had spent building this home, the sacrifices I had made, the nights I had gone without sleep to provide for him. And yet, here I was, watching the house I had poured my life into slowly slip from my control. The weight of helplessness pressed down, and for the first time in years, I wondered how long I could endure this steady erosion of my dignity. The house was quiet that evening, but the silence pressed down on me like a weight. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the dim light over the sink, trying to sort through the jumble of thoughts that had accumulated over weeks, months, really of small humiliations and constant dismissals. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up my mug of tea, wondering how I had come to this moment, how the son I had nurtured could stand so firmly against me in my own home. I thought of Ethan's face that afternoon, rigid with loyalty to Rebecca, his voice tight with irritation when I tried to speak. And then the fear struck me, what if, in trying to maintain peace, I lost him forever? The thought twisted in my chest, but beneath it, a firmer feeling emerged one I could no longer ignore. I would not allow my dignity, my home, or the memory of all I had built to be quietly stolen. I picked up the phone and dialed Vincent. My younger son listened patiently as I explained everything, the subtle disrespects, the arguments, the way Ethan had sided with her without hesitation. Vincent's voice was calm but firm. "Mom, you've been too patient for too long. You have every right to protect yourself. I'm here for you." By the time I hung up, the decision had settled in me like concrete. I contacted a locksmith, explaining the situation and arranging for him to come the next morning. My heart beat fast, a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. I rehearsed in my mind how it would unfold, Ethan fumbling at the door, Rebecca realizing this was no longer a game, the reversal of control settling like a steady pulse through the house. I finished my tea, set the mug down deliberately, and stood. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of clarity and strength. Tonight, I would reclaim what was mine. Tomorrow, the house would no longer be a stage for humiliation. It would be a fortress of respect. By mid-morning, Ethan and Rebecca arrived. Their moods light at first, oblivious to the quiet storm waiting behind my closed door. The click of the key in the lock sounded ordinary until it didn't turn. Ethan frowned, tried again, then jiggled the handle. "What the?" he muttered. Rebecca peered over his shoulder, her lips curling in annoyance. "They must have changed the lock," she said, her voice sharp with irritation. "Did you forget to tell me?" "I didn't forget," Ethan replied, a flicker of doubt passing over his face. He tried every key on his chain, each one failing, his brow furrowed, his jaw tightening. Rebecca's frustration mounted. She stomped along the porch, rattling the handle, muttering about incompetence and inconvenience. Inside, I stood by the window, my hands folded over the counter. I watched them circle the house, knocking on windows, peering into the garage, shaking the doorknob, their desperation growing by the minute. Every step they took was a step away from the control they thought they had. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The power had shifted. Still, worry gnawed at me. Ethan was my son, the boy I had carried in my arms through fevers, sleepless nights, and scraped knees. Would he understand why I had done this? Could he see beyond the immediate anger and embarrassment? I reminded myself that this wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. Their agitation escalated. Ethan's phone rang repeatedly as he called neighbors and friends for help. Rebecca tried to manipulate him, her voice softening, coaxing him with words meant to twist guilt into action. It's not fair. Ethan, she's being unreasonable, she murmured, brushing a hand across his arm. He paused, hesitated, then shook his head, refusing to surrender to her tone. I stayed silent, watching every gesture, listening to every frustrated word. The minutes stretched like hours, each one intensifying the emotional pressure. Sweat beaded on Ethan's forehead, his hands trembling slightly as he turned each key again. Rebecca's voice rose in desperation, then shifted to pleading, then returned to sharp accusations. I leaned against the wall, feeling a steady calm. The house, my home, was mine again, and I would not step aside for anyone who disregarded decades of sacrifice. Every slammed door, every frustrated shout from the porch was a reminder of the consequences of disrespect. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that I had reclaimed my authority, and sorrow for the son caught between his loyalty to me and his attachment to her. And then, as Ethan's voice cracked, almost pleading, I knew the moment of reckoning had arrived. The confrontation that had been building for months was here, raw and undeniable, and I would hold firm until the lesson was learned. Ethan's phone calls began before sunrise the next morning, each one more desperate than the last. I answered calmly, my voice steady, refusing to be swept up in panic or anger. Ethan, I hear you. I understand the situation, I said, even as my heart ached hearing him plead. I reminded him that respect was non-negotiable and that anyone who lived under my roof had to honor the rules I set. When he finally arrived alone, the tension in the air was thick but manageable. We sat at the kitchen table, the familiar space now charged with months of frustration and unspoken grievances. I began clearly, outlining what I expected furniture and decorations would remain as I arranged them unless discussed with me. Chores would be shared fairly, and the home was not a playground for anyone's whims. Ethan shifted in his chair, torn between loyalty to Rebecca and the realization that his mother's authority was undeniable. Mom, I know you're right, but it's my wife, he said quietly, a flicker of guilt crossing his features. I understand, Ethan, I replied, keeping my tone gentle but firm. This isn't about choosing between us. It's about respect. If Rebecca wants to live here, she must respect the house and me. That is non-negotiable. Rebecca stood nearby, arms crossed, her initial defensiveness palpable. I met her gaze steadily. I expect you to follow the same rules, I said. You will help with chores, consult me before rearranging anything, and approach conflicts calmly. A subtle shift crossed her face. Hesitation, acknowledgement, and perhaps understanding. She nodded slowly, the tension easing slightly. Ethan exhaled, the weight on his shoulders shifting as he realized that the house and his mother's dignity could not be compromised. For the first time, the three of us sat in the kitchen with a tentative truce, each aware of the boundaries and the consequences of crossing them. I felt a flicker of hope respect had been demanded, and for the first time, it was being understood. That afternoon, Rebecca returned alone, carrying a small bouquet of red flowers. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, and the confident stride I had seen before was tempered by something softer, nervousness, perhaps, or the weight of recognition. She set the flowers on the kitchen counter and met my eyes, avoiding the easy deflection of excuses. Mrs. Caldwell, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I need to apologize. I've been disrespectful. I moved things without asking. I ignored your space, and I let Ethan speak to you in ways he shouldn't have. She paused, and for the first time, I saw her vulnerability. It wasn't dramatic or performative. It was quiet, sincere. Ethan lingered in the doorway, his face conflicted. I watched him as he slowly sank into a chair, head bowed, realizing the role he had played in allowing this disrespect to continue. "Mom," he murmured, "I should have defended you sooner. I didn't. I let my loyalty to her blind me." I nodded, letting the words hang in the air. I studied Rebecca carefully, feeling the shift in her demeanor, the hesitation before she looked at me, the tight line of her hands, the small, almost imperceptible nods that indicated understanding. I wanted to believe her, but caution tempered my hope. "I accept your apology," I said softly, "but it must be reflected in your actions. Every day, not just words." She exhaled, a tension leaving her body as if the admission had released a burden she had carried for weeks. Ethan's shoulders relaxed slightly, and I could see the beginnings of reconciliation in the way he looked at us both, not as adversaries, but as a family negotiating its path forward. For the first time in months, the three of us shared a quiet moment in the kitchen. The air was still, but it carried a sense of renewal, fragile, yet real. The foundation for trust had been laid, tentative but steady, and I felt a cautious optimism that, perhaps, the home I had fought to protect could now be a place of understanding as well as shelter. The morning sunlight filtered through the living room curtains, painting warm stripes across the floor. For the first time in months, the house felt quiet in a good way, not tense or fraught with unspoken disputes. I moved through the rooms with purpose, tending my plants, straightening cushions, and placing the breakfast dishes on the table. Ethan appeared soon after, carrying a basket of fruit. He smiled at me, not nervously, not with the guarded hesitation of the past, but genuinely. Rebecca followed, carrying coffee mugs and a small tray of pastries. There was a new rhythm to their movements, a subtle acknowledgement of the house as mine, of the rules we had established together. We ate breakfast in conversation, laughing softly at a story Ethan shared from work. The chores of the morning were divided naturally. Ethan cleared the table, Rebecca helped with washing, and I handled the garden. Small disagreements arose where a plant should be placed, which dishes went in the dishwasher, but they were brief, discussed calmly, and resolved with mutual respect. Watching them work and move through the house, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in months. The tension that had once gripped every corner, every room, had dissipated. The home I had built with my own hands, brick by brick and stitch by stitch, was once again a place of comfort and belonging. Later, I sat in my favorite chair, sipping tea and listening to the quiet hum of life around me. Ethan and Rebecca laughed softly in the kitchen, their voices no longer sharp or impatient. I allowed myself to smile, a deep, contented smile that came from knowing that my dignity had been reclaimed, that the house and family could coexist in respect and understanding. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at home, not just in the walls and floors, but in the air, the rhythm, and the warmth of those who now honored both me and the life I had built. The house was whole again, and so was I.